that on that.
Oh, maybe not one going on the other one.
And then
So I grabbed all the other thing that you had like not been in
At
the
the
back
very
file.
oh, in there.
I got all that. I was up on that. There was like for no reason at all the debate that Coster and I had. I think it was with Coster.
That's
at the ADA.
right.
It's fucking burned into my mind on that day. I will never forget.
Well,
Because it was the most. We were in Kansas, like Kansas
Yeah.
judges, not like literally like home state maybe, like Vermont or something. And so everyone just like Kansas out, and I was like, guys, it felt like an LD debate in like in front of a bus driver. I was like, is this the NIST? What are you doing? But I remember it.
Well, I don't think this debate will work. Good luck, have fun.
Thanks.
We don't have a bus driver.
What you said?
So we don't have a bus driver yet either.
Yeah, but
I just sent the voice.
It started. Oh, you can just get it, what are you talking about? Alright, we'll wait outside for like 8 minutes. Then, or if I was.
Did you put debate docs on?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Michigan, you're good?
Yeah.
Deal? Yep. Wait.
Contention 1 is expertise. Trump trying to disturb civil servants and collective bargaining rights through a bevy of executive actions, especially rescheduling fiscal 25. Trump, to end non-partisan protection law, receive years that are part of the civil service, the entire workforce may quit or will. And first, is really discretion, conflict, the right bargain, like the NLRA, I'm trying to discourage and retaliate the industry executive monopolize for attacking CVR's position, subject those who work in both unions and managers allow to control content and enforcement. Stripping rights is the first step toward unfettered power for if control. The unions can bring admin to yield, not increasing efficiency. Officials interrogated and examine social media, not actually fire, make all. Fear if they will and fail loyalty, no matter how unlawful. Injunctions were stayed, Newland and 25. Trump had everything retirement, transferring RIFs and firing title to the payer. The strategy to fire civil service and fill with loyalistic court-lift injunctions allowed to move forward. Versions of them could be tolerable, but Trump purposely violate the bargaining rights to force courts to articulate a margin maximal interpretation of unitary executive theory that's what most concerns careers holdouts. Rothstein in 25, a lot of standards fair. This is about the big change rating considering how deep are going version of its legal. What happens now? They're violating a lot of CBA's loophole as if limitations are constituted that doesn't matter. Violates the CS rate, then purposely invite the charge to Supreme Court, low court to favor the consequences of that court. Those concerns with hollow state expertise, rendering agencies broadly incapable of effective policy implementation. Better in 25, schedule PC will work capacity to protect life drawing on UET's authority to create some version over their post-extensions into civil service defense of the breach. Structuring to require loyalty even if not RPT is politicizing two employees from offering expert opinions, discourage others from entering attorneys to violate the duty because seen as subverting more active view of build expertise and empirical study for the greatest predictor of success capacity able to remove employees and significant already removed thousands. Schedule PC for the deconstructing will impact services that make life livable. This aggregation of opaque existential risks outweighs more specific scenarios. Expertise is what contains impact across changes in things like regulatory direction and grid strategy shown in 70% insecurity. Civil service manages the biggest portfolio of catastrophic risk, adversary, nuclear, tactical, opaque, demanding setting managers protection, making it possible to perform an extreme risk. Operate advice, performance, conduct, loss of time, extremely damaging, cross-mission defense, or running new strengths, capabilities, Americans, a strong model, and interlocutor because civil service server, expertly corresponds able to take on nuclear security, pandemic response, environmental food safety, because, and more because qualification, not party, give advice based on data, and not fear reply. So expertise ensures Trump's foreign policy prevents rather than escalates the nuclear war with Russia, China, and middle powers. Cambridge in 25, Russian, Chinese, India, Turkish interactions, transactions, huge Trump factor might see it likely to disaster, further erosion of rules and borders, collision of erratic leaders and social media, desperation, and medium states, catastrophe likely in Ukraine, Taiwan, and the Middle East, because potential for nuclear war is the greatest a carved number of defeated Ukraine, which fire neighbors. Article 5 is all underwritten by the U.S. and far away, pull into the Baltic Span, the fight, psychological sense for escalation would be stronger, personalistic system agitated by injustice, discipline, diplomacy, could spark hostility between China and India, Russia, and Turkey, relation with Beijing and Moscow might not lead to breakthroughs, but advantage going to Ukraine, governments to prevent war in the Indo-Pacific, detecting with Iran and Syria, even though tensions remain more open negotiation of team, practice of debt management and constant tension could be able to compartmentalize on nuclear, non-proliferation arms control, pandemics, counter-terror, Arctic and space. Prevent a nuclear exchange, of course, perpetuity, protections, of course, of policies, other place, EU by to polar. Liam can use state corrupt to diffuse conflict and furniture, but it's not a co-op. It's not about revisionism nor polarity. Conflicts likely to emerge from interaction with middle powers whose perception of hegemonic competition generate resistance to cooperation. Space in 23, middle power activism may have a line clash to contribute to balancing diplomacy, but likely will exacerbate instability, prevention, attention, and no siege, travel, heightened escalation, and spillover conflict, will increase probability more through middle powers. Conflict between great powers is not wrong, but incomplete. Have a ground aggression and miscalculus, pull great powers, no major proxy wars, poses challenges to managing risk in a world resistant to being recruited. Conflicts will defeat primacy or retrenchment and competition and coercion. Contention 2 is personalism, application of a maximal interpretation of unitary executive theory to civil servants' labor rights. It's what determines institutional ability to resist and recover from trouble. Appointees Moynihan in 25. How long will it take to recover from trouble, no matter how much a court raises the UET maximal system of the civil service system on constitution becomes very hard because no actor can make credible commitments. Another pressing government the terms permanently viewed as unstable. Scottish move on board. Then prior immunity suggests willing to review unprecedented powers allowed to remove MSPB and NLRB. Very hard to see deciding fires or find out if will change any Humphreys executive step with ever respect to expertise not below any other MSPB, especially traveling. Little reason to believe will get a fair appeal with Trump on other powerfully established category to impound funds or dismantle HCs. That specific intersection uniquely enables personalist metastasis by the court ascension 25 by Trump succeeds in limiting professionally enabled by UET executive power can easily metastasize such autocracy cannot rely on statutory power alone. Have to argue more includes more than the duty to take care of immunity. The majority view that admin supervision within the recursive power to the Congress or judiciary may limit his way. He can convert all the executive into lickspittles of Congress cannot regulate, cannot prosecute, why push it further, or because no one can enforce other checks and implementations controlled by loyalist dominant 25 loyalists pose a great risk to legal normative foundation of person the first term of the insurrection and nullify the election the first time no admin. Willing to put the Constitution with loyalty workers will take care of chambers, not say democracy most ominous if judiciary rule acts are illegal and Trump carries on agency of the unitary executive control of plumbing so can simply turn off the pipe from any insiders suspect that this is happening laws and course notwithstanding the else within the admin or Trump committed other impeachable offenses not held accountable leaves only checks on admin corruption in the IG agency to labor relations even a weekly and perfectly bring independent judgment when Trump has been firing members. The impact to uncheck Trump is unique and disjunctive, catalyzing many polycrisis feedbacks to extinction, including nuclear wars. Homer Dixon in 24 links of a constitutional point Trump secretary will subordinate to trade skewing global risk and extreme most more likely to empower authoritarianism massively and abroad and increase uncertainty about how the U.S. respond to crisis. The result is likely great power war far more severe polycrisis by altering existing stress and generating triggers and catalyze crisis impact assessment circle loss guardrails and personnel previously provided trouble dismiss obstacle to place the lawyers by schedule after adopt UET combined by Congress instead by such a be issued in favor or avoid rather than selling loyalists to influence really sees voting machines to check to diminish protest response to crack down the military suppress create a state of exception would validate as part of authoritarian leaders a crucial example of how democracy peace powerfully reinforced no country's position Chinese suppression towards one whether involved in unpredictability deter likely to make unconsidered decision escalating crisis and stumbling into nuclear transactional diplomacy progressively lose coordination America provided such a shift in crisis management would road with development trade economic stability and peace building we give nuclear CNC use and a whim unlikely greater consensus quality advice under extreme pressure Trump is a product of systemic trust inequality alienation migration retrenchment and weakening institution all PD public will continue to escalate still regardless still has accelerated many well adding more stresses and uniquely turbulent triggers of global systemic crisis it collapses nuclear deterrence and empirical checks on escalation internally and externally Hyman's and 22 Trump says the nuclear threats political struggles to domestic components even homeland deterrence suffer from credible limits foreign powers that calculate will not be punished for certain targets exploit nuclear crisis conduct a shakedown distracted by internal regulating effect announcement of nuclear crisis foreign powers also initiate crisis to intensify divisions these options reaction increases turns sensibilities much by confusion and about change of command not speculation reaction to Trump JC's research when meaning humanity shifts the survival pessimism beyond Trump U.S. legitimation of personalism catalyzes existential global acting capacities and wars independent of democracy or populism Hansen in 24 all dependent on nations without food water and air will be poison revert to personal results millions of death and plagues flood and genocide between the survival of species not about democracy the MSU already done great damage for the small takes to catch up communities democratic decline yet is more and will outlet Trump punch colonialism historically violent put down right and frequently invaded neighbors and autocracy and populism don't fully describe U.S. anti-state sentiment morphed into an attempt to administrate civil service behind this and enhance executive power with disastrous consequences for the world. We should fortify the state also requires her existing siren calls of the left include radical democratic inclusion worse than the disease need to recruit to service less attrition of expertise past the tipping point for policy must meet the challenge of global liberal order. The future of humanity depends on an alliance of lobbies states rather than the relations among men. The plan does not renew liberal hegemony and we do not need to win the LIO is good. Only our scenario for accelerated legitimation of rule of law makes any alternative far worse. Richmond in 25 critique highlights epistemological and ontological limitations yet equate multiplayer with polymerous how to progressive alliances captured critique rule of law no longer norm revolutionary politics substituting emancipation for autocracy based on empiricism and work trouble society established academics including outside the West and orders rather related to Russia China bricks over little responsible world liberal peace advantaging regions transcendent into hybrid wars regional systems with insufficient resources for pacemaking increased violent repression the ILO and post from below and above will affect the democratic peace and development of the state of exception went with backsliding has collapsed over resistance of little to offer root cause of conflict of sustainability or hoarding those remain sense the end of liberalism social resistance cannot oppose authoritarian reality geopower determines that ontology of peace rather than epistemological advances the LIO stalemate collapse into war offers neither an alternative neoliberal or inequality climate change war and critical claims camouflage of services to power while liberal peace is undermined as ambition was a plausible response to critique multipolar or risk existential calling evidence by rapid increase of wars the plan the United States federal government should restore collective bargaining for federal career employees weakened by executive action contention 3 solvency collective bargaining is both necessary and sufficient handler in 24 civil service check powers of CB proponents require keep safe skeptic fear and appeal president rights complicated each Congress of course no longer here both the size and expertise monitor resist bureaucrats practical and legal ability substantial by leveraging asymmetries of resources enable more disgrace to challenge policy rights to CB policy constraining HC head Trump accelerated leveraging rights to influence policies as other structures protect commanders effort 12 multiply empirically 1,000 adjudication from case studies demonstrate challenges assumption of the stops and also enhance power and expand capacity in other ways complicated the universe critique rights susceptible to democratic oversight disputes otherwise fall through opaque attempts to subvert court channel negotiation or appeal enables branches to supervise regularly CV changes force and process how all decisions are shaped tools. The president uses discipline, budget, standard scholarships, presume operate top down, but more often bargain strategies and capacity agencies could continue reassigning demoralization, cutting funding and pay unions, routinely leverage rights to prevent numerous examples during trial. The primary means for resisting with labor litigation also constrains substantive policy in many indirect and bigger ways opportunities under labor. Reinstate reveals only quarter of MSPB critics accused less efficient evidence contest condition ability to lead criticize or speak out protected even if not unions successfully use over objection all management rights not only influence policy or primary job of unions with the bedrock of resistant battles reflects neutrality CV and power resources and expertise allowing defenses to achieve higher win rates with threat of incentivizes agencies to cooperate and take preferences to the policy intervention to strengthen it ensures employer credibility to retain expertise and check personalism or worse recover from Trump bad or 25 positive relationship to capacity and structure independence not require complete transfer of control from the president's strong discretion encourages expertise studies evidence court to protect against intentional maladministration presidents have an obligation to pay the managed creative prohibition maliciously constructed presidents undermine lie that answers to such facing fiscal course police Roberts explained can always shoot to restrain tell the daily subordinate cannot choose by success to suggest president cannot manage in ways that limit the power of future president could want unitary executive prohibit time control but permit undermining capacity presidents can only be when control capacity are in concern requires more than bigger budgets environment amenable to recruiting retaining greater civil service and autonomy over policy courts have refused to intervene in determining signing CSRA exclusive procedures. Good for cross.
Okay. I want to start after of the plan. Is it courts, Congress, just Trump?
There are various interpretations of the plan, so I mean,
Most likely one.
there are various interpretations of the plan that could include a Supreme Court ruling. There's an active case in the circuit court now. It could also include Trump just undoing the order.
So the most likely interpretation, I get that there are multiple interpretations of the plan, that the plan could be these things. I'm not trying to go for like a counter plan, I just want to know what the plan does.
I don't
What is
want
the
that.
most likely interpretation of who does the plan?
The most likely, but not for the purposes of establishing competition for counterplans.
Yes.
Would probably be the case, like there's a circuit
There's a
court
case
right
active
now.
in the circuit court. They
that
would likely
ruled
just
against
rule
Trump,
against
that-
Trump.
Circuit
As-
court rules against Trump.
And then probably the Supreme Court would deny cert, but again, like, we don't think that any
Wait,
of
so
that
the Supreme
establishes
Court wouldn't
counterplan.
follow onto the, how is the plan
No, they
enforced
would, they
then?
would deny cert, which means that they agreed with the circuit ruling, that's how the courts work.
Oh, okay,
Like when they
sure.
deny cert, they're like, yeah, you got this right,
Okay,
we don't
yeah,
need to
okay.
overrule it, we're chill.
What collective bargaining rights or agreements does the plan restore?
Like, there are a litany of them, but I think the most significant ones would be like policy autonomy, whistleblower protections, things that like would allow them to more credibly resist illegal orders. There's a lot of protections they have now. I can't like, I'm not an expert
Okay,
on
and
like
is
the
this just
text
for,
of their
like-
CBA, but like,
it's
there's
just-
a ton of stuff.
Is this just for like federal agencies or is it beyond that? Which agencies would it apply to? Is it just all
What
of them?
agencies wouldn't it apply to?
Or does it apply to like all agencies within the government?
Well, there are some agencies that have never had collective bargaining rights, so the ones that never had them probably wouldn't get them.
And the verb that the plan uses is restore collective bargaining rights. The
Yeah.
reason we have chosen that verb is because Trump stripped collective bargaining rights as per when I see Fisk and when I see Moynihan. So, the plan would likely be the CBRs that Trump has removed. The two primary things that he did are firing and policy autonomy via Schedule PC and Schedule G. I think
Okay.
that those are the likeliest interpretation, but obviously we don't think that picks out of the word right
Okay,
or
sure.
competitive because
Sways-
it's plural.
Sure. Swages evidence, like the,
Middle powers, yep.
what about middle powers? Okay, what is the scenario for conflict?
Yeah, so middle powers are becoming increasingly active in the international system, drawing in major powers into regional conflict. When there is not a transactional set of diplomacy or when there is not civil servants who can necessarily mitigate the impact of Trump, those middle power interactions are more likely to escalate and spiral into.
Wait, middle power interaction, so like Canada and like Russia go to war, is that the scenario?
I mean, like, maybe Joanna has a better answer to this, but
I
like,
mean, perhaps not Canada. A better example would be like actors near and around Russia, like Romania isn't necessarily allied to Russia or
So
necessarily
Romania and
allied to
Russia
NATO, but they're
escalate.
certainly like
Also a
involved.
country
Turkey
like-
is another example.
Why would that go against?
our evidence also lists evidence like, or lists countries like Turkey or India who are more maybe expansionist, have sort of revisionist aims, that sort of thing.
Okay, let's see what's down. It's 6, and then advantage 1 against 2.
What help?
No, I was trying to put it on your side first. You're next. It's not a threat, it's a promise, you are next.
You said it was 6, is it?
Correct.
6, 1, 2?
Yes.
Alright.
Or expertise, personal, if that's the 1, 2, but
To be clear, you intended to send the conflicted copy?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm still waiting. Okay. I'm good.
Deal.
Yeah, I got it.
Maybe I could.
First off, D substance, CBR, means no substance, U.S. Historic Court, and 22 collective bargaining rights, Chinese summary, Congress, player, rights to affirmative action, employees, recognition, collective negotiation, rights to appointment, arbitrary, granularity, could implement the environmental differences between your employer and employees, and the right to correspond to any term I was defining very specifically, determined pension credits, essentially refers to all rights except a negligible minority tax court, and 65 pension meaning except a negligible minority, that Supreme Court must be given ordinary meaning of a state less one negligible amounts of percentage non-constitutional substantially, voting for limits and ground religion, substance stops the delusion of individual industry, company, and technology have to circumvent core generics and exploit link uniqueness, negative impacts, a more significant first and last speech, infinite prep and resolution, moral high ground needs to try or die. Next off, the Secalque collective bargaining rights are an alibi for continued settler domination, allowing colonialism to recuperate and further dispossess the indigenous Southern Angler, and 20 Americans, the colonial process, property, land, capitalism, labor, community, striking different locales, striking hands, between civil societies, colonial colony, on the back of the dispossession required later, labor confrontation between settler, labor, and capital can be resolved while Southern colony continues to expand intensifying dispossession to remove material conditions, settler, workers, participate in accumulation, occupation, land, extraction of resources at a basic level of their workplace, are all permits under the government control of land dispossession, taxes, salary, community, together, despite classification, participating in dispossession leads to immediate material against the global union labor, so for settlement of workers who are victims of economic reforms, for redistribution, settler struggle, is make sure distribution of wealth within settler populations through the institutional struggle, the settler regime is determined. The logic of elimination is grounded in the collective unconscious and exists beyond utility, derailing any attempt to status reform for preconscious, absolute refusal of settler control, Curie, and 23 colonial project reconfiguring subjectivity, stability, to colonialism, not merely upholding people, and the just the past and destroy state in our unconscious state is not an individual or the traditional cycle, but it's social, political, and colonial unconscious reason, settlers free of political activities during Congress within utopic desire for opportunity, all things indigenous, the relegate the two primitive demonic violence, exceeded any necessity for control, reduce the reverse protection, the brutality of settler logic, requires such as standing object, and the word appropriation of the object, a frozen necrophilia of the colonial, other represent the speakability and demonstrated by instance of redeeming of the act of European culture and recognition, the absolute united colonial, as signifier allows ability to colonize everything decolonization cannot be a multi or moderate for decolonization, requires it to be established in indigenous sovereignty, unconscious cannot be defining colonial rule, we must find new preconscious collectivity of the settlers unless we're doing it denial, we are accountable to something until while we go to be deteriorated, want to still land in every say, we know well land is how we recognize and place the first educate, ourselves a wise possibility, we will cease desire, pause, is anyone timing, because I did not.
Start my 6:50.
Next up, Congress collective bargaining rights are legislative, not courts. 119, we reviewed the scope of CBR is a matter of legislative, not courts. Vote neg 1 position. The Court of Iowa is clarifying that CBRs are a matter of legislation. 2 ground, there's no case. The neg 2 infinite labor tension court cases and court is kind of assumed legislation. Next up, the states cannot plan dependencies and relevance of national actors should suspend their cooperation with federal initiatives until the federal government restores collective bargaining rights for federal career employees on the weakened by executive actions and create a constitutional right to collective bargaining rights right to collective bargaining for federal career employees. Of national bargaining results in federal uptake until aggressively expanding state sovereignty. Johnson. 26 the labor groups have been sexual at state levels of 29, and the states will have wages higher than national states have anti-discrimination laws at the national level this year. Majority of permit engagement and participation that is missing. And federal state 50 state experimentation for alternative space for the development of time opposes the national levels blocking the limitation federalism and advancing charge policies at federal level of government. Reasserting state sovereignty counterbalances governance failures from federal encroachment extinction. Like I said, we face economic insecurity under public career ISIS in turn to warning these systems of a greater problem. The risk is failures within years of the civilian governance and transfer states that there is so much of that debates are involving negotiations, possible increase in analysis of wellness we address so the big failures in face for us, we will never get solutions to societal challenges to adjusting how short-term power to states. Otherwise, the infection will get worse. A convention causes follow-on and avoids politics. The Cooper 21 Constitution provides a path of the states a convention ratified 3 quarters, particularly if Congress moved down ruling when that was one state side of the convention. Congress every other reacted by the mandate of the powering effective Hoover today. Opponents can fear runaway. Article 5 could be for limited purposes. Congress declined. Amendments outside the scope. Next up, the politics of the United States federal government should prohibit the president from exercising pocket rescission authority to cancel previously appropriated forward aid funding. No shutdown now. Hill and 92 in the House are talking about funding until to December. Putting off ultimatums, putting this with appropriation share on the kosher work to avoid shutdown. Key and judges are unified. Labor reform blows up Congress opposition filibuster empirics. 1122 liberal livelihood. I'm not pro-worker for remain elusive. LRA died after 6 to overcome the Western countries. Border bill never taken out their words that denied Republicans sort into power recommendation never taken out. EFCA not even among some of the Democrats against CDUs approved of any other reform and face that taking opposition and creating difficult to pass the fail floods are continue to be argued against various reform. Shutdown collapse of cybersecurity and green lights attacks previous shutdowns. Don't because Doge that puts us on the brink. Starting to 25 shutdown lose that could worsen problems. cyber agencies experiencing under shutdown, I'm not hiring the personality as Trump's doing pursues of personal concept during shutdown implementing the patches for vulnerability more acute the personal concept reduction in cybersecurity workforce reload as people working on cyber Trump not rolled out the vision for cybersecurity shutdown and fixing that have been broken to degree however extent the shutdown and magnified damage to Trump is under cybersecurity Trump force goals at the CAC were furloughed cyber attacks are likely an existential monarch and 20 what is power cannot be destroyed and the one power cannot be destroyed the electricity could be repair leaders the promise power rise by cyber attacks of the president and threat the cyber wars who will menace the reach a level catastrophic leads to a parade of horrors of food scarcity communication could see the clean water will become a luxury hospital would go darker and transactions would stop this is the type of the ice chaos would reign disease would be your merchant tester or you're going to recorded 650 million attempts to reach just in the Russian power 1,000 in Western Ukraine. Next up, the race the United States federal government should announcing conform to a policy of returning trade barriers to 2024 levels and announcing conform to a policy of reversing Trump administrative cuts to science R&D funding, rolling back tariffs, also effort. 2025, how can the president pivot and declare victory, having struck deals while taking a step back. The president could simply announce to raise a lower tariff to zero. Trump has the opportunity to pivot, reversing funding cuts stalls. Counter 25, so the Congress must protect us at NIH and implemented an OAA and NASA for member station of investment in science. Weak job data that guarantees rate cuts. So we're also 95 August. The report said whether the Fed would resume get rate cuts. Although still not, I'm not sure about the expectation for other cuts. The markets are raised on cuts of 75%, and the chance that the Fed will cut at the three winning meetings of labor market supported a second argument equaling job market. But the natural break against one-time increase at the cost increase of importing goods, inflation. The plan creates a lucrative outside option for workers across the economy, provoking a feedback loop of wage hikes that spreads across industries. Green to reduce unionization, the resulting increase in wage. They said an increase in the outside option for workers in other industries, inducing further increase in their wages, and then increase the value of the outside option, which applies to further increase in the outside option for other industries. And one unit change, and then the outside option becomes a 1% once we include the levels of the spillovers. 5 high rates on the destroy tech innovation in every sector, casting 24. High interest rates are discouraging on that discourage on the investing in tech, leading to slower innovation, the big growth. That is widely used innovation indicators aggregate investment and IP, VC, R&D and patents for every 1 point rise in the rates R&D spend on the spending fell 3% of VC investment fell 25% of that patent innovation to 9% and then 9% initiative of the lower overall economic opportunity to TFP on the reduced aggregate demand making it less probable to innovate less incentive to and then develop other new products that have investor appetite for reducing financing and the interest rose level and the rates of rose venture funding on the full 30% decline occurring in all industries and new patents were in the important tech ML economy being more affected by rates. Innovation bolsters societal resilience that caps existential black swans. Action matter until working at tech reduces prosperity and many levels less vulnerable to things and advanced morality very lucky. Sentiments are re-emerged to cause the eye in the longer taking acid toward zero catastrophes avoidability acceleration. It is guiding optimal policy and Nigeria whose curve with hazard rate and the falling as tech advances safety is a largely good. Both these are inclined to be safer productive as increase motivation and stringent policy to the future contains a sequence that which induces a probability you can actually slow growth that makes survival possible as you grow and increase willingness to neighbor safety and the concern on the climate policy reduction have long-term consequences for acceleration worsen also survival. Now advantage 1 no Trump focus impact over 24 Trump is obscured by false portrayal when one looks at the record of Trump over the worst of the other 24 so the friendly government single combat with the Japan and the Gulf Seas were showing the rest of the Philippine services and trade Iran was the growth boulder weakness and Christ out for coming to the evidence on the mix up the messages about Beijing and the by negotiating with Iran allies so and this weakness generally about the important U.S. partners who contain Tehran, and the divided weakness here through Afghanistan, and the dragon speed and keep allied assurances are intact. We're going to H1, but we travel to Japan and Philippines are interviewed by military leaders who are contracting with the perception of his business as usual. The officials have reached inconsistency was engaging critically. Hexet or cut the card at Hexet. Okay, now no side shoots first. How does we find the U.S. will not go to war? The cost is too high. The returns to little U.S. is deep in debt, and the U.S. has never waged war against a criminal adversity will and will not enter conflict without a probability of victory. And the China's capabilities are comparable to U.S. if these Trump does not exist. China and U.S. are a war, but have no winner only destruction. Now, the personal advantage. Democracy enacts military flashpoints. Missile truth, the American eclipse system, the economy developed in countries, the resources, the demands, the really free election, and property rights. Japan and with our office of the larger police, the eclipse attempts for go to the contraband, the northwest passage to a group of museum, high military, speed, safe, oil, and fish of the education, every leading eclipse of migrating analysis to show down as the only higher risk of the for claims that non-evident confirmed in replication model risk, 46% higher on the conflict between Denmark, frequent maritime issue, rebuilding contention, and peace and the future as we sort of becoming contestant, and space environment, and the disputes with sailing issues of the oil and fish land, and the becoming violently conflict race service, the maritime claim become military. Extinction, Caution 24, war as he involved in the news and the news I knew myself tried to see that at sea on the street is no different from anywhere else. I knew the destruction on the vessel, the superstructure, on the superstructure, the over pressure by Europe's energy, generating heart crew on the shockwave underwater can destroy hull on the news at sea, and complicated implemented vessels and consequential, and a combination with the policy of favor drawing no distinction between various nuclear democracy makes okay now no nuclear populism impact on the Russian Kupalan and 22 colonies and 72 nuclear danger there the drawbacks of the should not be exaggerated moody focus on India's conventional military moody and jealousy hiding on the nuclear danger rhetoric is so aggressive audience and actors have we seen any statement pursuing use and response and was trying to know on the Ukraine and the more important drivers they have always been considered by American commitments and predates for alliances remain strong emerging India and maintain the soul going force the populist wars are starting to be on.
Okay, so quick question.
Yeah.
On the democracy.
Just the maritime stuff.
So So,
The first card was the Mitchell card, is that
yeah,
right?
first is Mitchell, then
The Spratt card? or-
Kaushal. It did not. No, I said Mitchell, Kaushal,
Kaushal, yeah,
and then Rajagopalan. Rajagopalan.
got it.
Yeah.
You just said extinction, and the
Yeah.
tag of extinction was the Spratt card, so I just
Okay,
wanted to
yeah,
clarify.
that's-
Got it.
Wait, sorry, and then advantage one,
Well,
do you have a
this is
marked
right.
copy, so we don't need to?
I marked, yeah,
And
it's
Hexet for
yeah.
Greco.
yeah, Hexet and Greco. So marked Greco at Hexet,
Particularly Hexa?
yeah,
Okay,
and then I said heat.
you good?
Yeah.
Okay, status?
Conditional against new and undisclosed plan texts.
It's okay.
Planks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The critique.
Yeah.
What's the story on the alt? What are we doing?
That is an awesome question for my partner.
We give the land back.
Give the land back. Who does that? The government?
The government, every person in the US that's not indigenous.
Every person in the U.S. So like I give the land back.
Yeah,
You fiat that I give the land back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Just like voluntarily.
I mean, it's like fiat.
Does the
fiat
US
every
government
settler in the
continue
US.
to exist in its
Yeah.
current form?
Can the government exist in a world of the
No.
alt?
No.
Can it result in the plan?
Obviously not.
Can it result in collective bargaining rights?
Obviously not. What?
Okay. What's the link story? I mean, you got a card that's like unions are mean sometimes. Like, what's the deal?
The AF defends the US liberal order and democracy, democratic leadership, in cooperation. And we've also read an argument that any protection for workers is necessarily predicated off of
Any protection.
control of indigenous land and labor.
Right. We should let just people exploit workers. That's true.
No, we should get off the land. Like,
Yeah.
that's
No.
predicated on fundamental
I'm
rights.
with you.
Getting
I
rid of
totally
government would
understand.
get rid of
I'm totally.
Trump's
We're on the same page, dude. Don't even worry about it. The federalism counterplan.
Yeah.
The last plank: create a constitutional right to collective bargaining.
That's the con-con.
Right. Does the federal government do that?
No, it actually says the 50 states should create a constitutional right to collective. I don't
Yeah,
know
but your
what
cards,
this would be.
your cards about.
Cards about states doing a con-con.
So is it a
2025.
constitutional amendment for the states or the federal government?
The states create a constitutional right, so interpret that as the logical reading of it.
So all 50 states would have the same constitutional rights
Yes.
for federal workers.
Yes.
The states would.
Yeah.
Are you hearing yourself?
I mean, like, the states obviously have some control over the administrative state.
States have control over the federal administrative state.
If the Constitution is changed, it would obviously result in federal action.
Yeah.
Okay. The rates DA. What about the plan causes no rate cuts?
Causes what? Oh, well, I mean, it's, so the green evidence says that the plan spills over to unionization in other industries, which causes wage hikes that spread across
Yeah, but
industries.
your ev is about like private sector
Well,
unionization.
so if the plan causes private sector unionization that spreads across industries, that causes a rate hike
Why
because
would
it
the plan
causes
cause
such
private
a-
sector unionization?
The green evidence says that the resulting increase in the wage is an increase in the outside option for workers, in all caps, everything, in other industries. It says that a shift in unionization is a thing that
Okay,
causes
but
that.
like,
So unions within
government
the
is not
federal
an
workplace will
industry.
clearly spill over.
okay.
And that causes a rate hike because the
Okay.
first card says that rate cuts are coming because
Sure.
of weak labor market.
The democracy term, which maritime flashpoints are ignited by democracy?
The Kaushal evidence says that. Sorry, so the
Maybe the
answer.
South China Sea, East China Sea conflicts in the Indian Ocean, perhaps.
Okay. Wait. Okay, 938. Oh, no, not true.
Yeah.
Okay, 945. I'm sending it. Order is expertise then personalism. T no courts, T Congress. T's. T subsets. Like the con uncovered federalism in the states. I don't know what to call that. I think they call it federalism. Second. Rates. Shut.
Give again from courts.
Good to know.
Sweet. No Trump latched on as an add-on. Their evidence warned that advisors would check in, which was our internal link. The civil service is key given his current appointees as karate. These are Trump focus will absorb every harassment to autonomy government food concern. These systematic investigations found empirical confirms there's a broad consensus. Our scenario wasn't lashed out, but Trump indirectly increases nuclear risk through mismanaged crises, class foreign relations, strategic instability, and polycrisis triggers, eroding all historical constraints on conflict and escalation. But lash out is serious. As Congress Trump, it also shutting down the hardware sector, Trump killing, stop shutting down agencies. Assurance is okay is not an answer to our argument. Their powers are not allies, which is the whole point. So we're not sending Pete Hegseth to go talk to them because they're allied with nobody in particular, and they've conceived of the term impact. Middle powers both cause and solve war. They cause it because they have personal interests and they will draw other powers in, and they solve it because they will prevent great powers from starting war near. It's also only the case because of experts like diplomats who go to visit other countries, which they've also conceded no Russian war is wrong. In fact, the US policy because an Article 5 showdown over Ukraine, which causes nuclear war, guaranteeing extinction, personalism. There's zero link to democracy bad. We don't increase the number of eligible democracies, which is the threshold for their offense. Only the degree to which both democracies and autocracies respect expertise through checks to internal executives. That's Hansen and Hansen 24 debate focus on democracy over which other states government law according to law of personal loans and not many democracies and personal numbers, authority regimes, laws of security for more important threat patrimony regime, fiscal initiatives, democracy for your security, second. Never get out of countries alike. Their terms are about autocracies having better state capacity. That cannot possibly be offense because our internal link is about other governments weakening their own state capacity. That's Hansen. There's also no terminal impact. The only scenarios described in cross-text were about China, both Kimmich and Over-Dixon in the one I see. Since the gap is the only way to solve that because we can de-escalate things going on using experts. Nuclear populism answered on the other advantage, but the card is about Trump. It lists Modi and other leaders, and it's the warrant for why they won't go nuclear. It says either advisors check, which is our argument, or they would just use their conventional military, but that is still a war that escalates and conceded polycrisis. There's extinction, cumulative side effects will overwhelm any adaptation, and defense which guarantees extinction T. We meet the plan could be executive reversal of XOs that strip CBRs, which courts merely uphold or deny cert for, and the plan to only inject standard counter-turn CBR strength is a skill-based measure of legal discretion, giant 20 name strength CBRs for redeveloped skill-based measure cuts of legal strength more comprehensively than alternatives, including the percentage unionized or covered by CB. Any simple amount of second full picture of the power was already square, evident for now for iron, blood, retain discretion, taking all hours to do that. This year, realism and arbitration, order, making general practice, and literature proceedings. It includes courts, such as 14, and for the right to work and collectively determine by laws and incorporation sections that would be easily taking solid for XOs. Per one, contextual precision, Freeman's scale is the most comprehensive inside key to predictability. Second, F-flex, it leaves us defenseless against counterpoints and court decides. Third, over limits make every referendum on the Congress key advantage, which is unworkable for no offense. Few advocates, Capcade, Econ, double blind, and states plus links are fact-based anyway. Reasonable is best can be used because of race, abundance, substance, T substance. We meet the plan's only objective answer, substantially determined by contextual use given the two criteria meetings understood by persons, legal resolution, running advocated by other uses and accomplished not with suspension of physical meetings, applies to all subject is not never we meet it, adding highlighting to the one I see, fiscal 20 about them. The impact is substantial paragraph when you employ all labor relations, running at 88% of the intent to treat the laws and access to substantially overhaul prefer one grammar or one background picks out of an enterprise, industry, or region, or worse on the negative, unpredictable, and like literature, generic to the offense. Second, mixes burdens whether or not every worker is affected, dependent on the short joint union. Third, precision, context, need, access, predictability, what makes it burns, it turns their offense. Four, cross-apply the other stuff from the also the U.S. District Court is saying you must give all of the rights the plan does that, and says, quote, it could encompass any part, which is obviously subsets, and their tax court part is defining substantially all, so of course it means subset states. Perm to the counterplan, perm to both, it shields perception. The counterplan links to that benefits. The fight is controversial, especially follow on. Perm to the counterplan and the plan is the outcome no matter what. It does not say certainty or immediacy, but immediacy bad competition justifies consult and delay. There's no follow on. Trump did the opposite of the plan, and it links to all things because you would spend PC to explain what happened in a con. It doesn't solve one. Only plan clearly states historical legality comparison. No for example, legislative response to effective most users control sexual legal law, touching the law, right, doing legality should be reserved, right, conserved, judicial branches, appropriate vetting to protect the rights to UET can invest absolute power from the legal buyers as we work design and doctrines not being subcommittee mounting subject should be civil service of rights of the rest. Can be under the responsibility to the execute government democratic principles unconstitutional. Second, get struck down the rest of the Constitution. Taking conventional or workable no finish or application, whether Congress will get application, whether conventory, nobody knows how it can be counted, Congress or Congress, the constitutional law, or in there, certainly use law, fundamental, but also the fact that the government is a competition of Congress, four states, convention itself, mark that, and that convention itself, and there obviously states cannot do federal workers in their state constitutions because it's not the same thing. Trump will re-raise the fight, not cave terms, not benefit, and get struck down the penny in 25 from California, complete almost completely to term motion, second term, whole motion, PA/20, battle over property has always been more aggressive, better organisms, more clear areas where have dangerous impact, public health, immigration, extra analysis, Trump also federal state council, president, level, public health ministry, federal, political, great states, full effects, real other states, the little potential one, that of course is usually be operationally many years past. There's also no one instance is out of the kind of plan activation feels over because they're already being uncooperative sanctuary cities, but there's no internal link from non-compliance to federal sovereignty. The card is and concludes that the kind of plan could never possibly solve dysfunction. Second call. How to his bad frustrations are good at punches bad one season. Makes the negative a moving target, which is bad for strategic and research. Framework. The ballot is a referendum on the plans that are built. Links will see calls are unique, but they solve it. 1AC with adjustments in that class, we get step reps to the correspond on the state level, but they propose the plan, prioritizing theory and representation over policy relevance, suppresses ethical formation, promoted 17 critical mechanism policies, minimal represent only within the bubble related to policy making engaged mechanism to theorize policy, the governing only process bubble, not the rules turn physical representation for supporting relatives and punishment, they do it in funding warming, dynamically denouncing its justice system use, substitutes certifying analysis, and firm to both firm to the plan and non-mutual exclusive parts of the alternative, and firm to the plan through the lens of the alternative, it solves the residual link. The link does not contextualize their emphasis about the historical issues labor has had. Nothing that implicates a plan and not about federal workers. Cedar links doesn't contextualize. Federal unions will not bargain for wages or represent compromise with settlers. The 1AC handler proves that, quote, working conditions just means, quote, resisting state capture, which is only the term, not a link. Decolonization is multifaceted. The land back movement and countless native-led victories demonstrate that incremental legal victories can reverse possession and elimination better in 22, striking down the land deal in the direction of decolonization, being placed in charge of restricting so that the complexity diversity and validity of the struggle escape the much we walk over things through today, the social language, terms, talking, enable building, houses, schooling, and adventure, return ancestral land to the water, the Hadoop site, set up a reflection shop in the housing development on unprecedented landmark that at land, the alternative, every part of the case is a dissent because it does not do CBRs, and we have said the federal government is good, but it also causes Trump lash outs because you'd be the one giving up everything, and give the land back without a text or a card to justify it is a voting issue. There's no literature that compares to the plan, and it was unpredictable rates. The unique use kind of plan does not solve restoring simply, and the affirmative turns that restoring simply money for things is not sufficient because you need experts to carry it out, but there's no link uniqueness. One, the plan is a return to a pre-Trump status quo, which empirically disproves the link chain. Second, economic decision-making is hosed by Trump's actions on the BLS, reversing that unlocks and forms the certain choices about rates that Kruger. The Trump's decision and the federal foundation to govern central role in monetary policy and forecasting mail reliability and opportunity growth. We also know about guide last week as business investors. Shows a rate price within the movements of BLS. Release data coming down parts of technical councils or low as close as years. So I know common mistake, Trump, which you get for accurate data consensus. No consequences for use of global economy or catastrophic. 3, attacks on civil servants, control long-term structural drivers of the economy, which controls their internal link. That's Peterson talking about Trump to special life for specials that do knowledge chilling agencies facing new gag orders, suppressing new features, and conflict economic plans, certain innovation for providing areas based on intervention growth range, weakening innovation while rallying resident evidence-based decision-making, the underground civil economy, market based on like government, policy size, introduce uncertainty over under waste of organic innovation, job sign, and also crisis on streaming for innovators. The link cannot be true. The plan reverts to a pre-Trump status quo. If people wanted those jobs, it should have happened, which is the only thesis of the link, that people want high-paying jobs, but the government aren't even the highest-paying jobs, especially because the card's not about federal workers. The link starts at 0.03%. Federal workers are barely 1% of the total workforce, and only 2% of them might even get fired. Economic concerns are empirically denied and overblown, plus immigration numbers mathematically outweigh even 25 hours determinations when 9% of the economy travels jobs and market layoffs. If a small fraction still within the language of destabilizing economic engine, not going to the global economy, plus 30 move at economy, labor market needs. Everybody pauses summary, safety, labor markets, not to your nails, not severely, yours is not a vacuum, this is uncertainty, higher above, that tariff, immigration, back and forth, sure, fed, else, I don't remember about 0.25%, overshadowed by 2%, going from crackdown, schedule F, chills innovation, and controls the internal link to both these sides, nickel and 25 sexual love, chills, technical, for security, technology, and equity, pronounce more challenging to govern to the best on the working, arguing, equality, focus, and parties, table, workplace, focus on conversation, particularly UCID, on creating this world's impact technology, not one-year project, shut down, firm to both, it pleases them so much, so across the islands, for inevitably precision, links to the dishead, voting 25 as, set details, district, customer, restricting, content, movement, for deep, custom, the line voters, workers, opportunity, language, trust, information, not intrinsic, logical, policy maker, redo, the bill, and the plan, course, link, limit 17, professional wisdom, knowledge, judiciary, system, political, yeah, no, having considered policy, legislation, and rules, and then you go to good leadership blame. That's especially true for the efforts announced in June 1 and the 25, the rule on the merits on left until the next Supreme Court term, and other anti-Trump court rulings empirically disprove the link the plans under the radar. And no PC is needed right here in 25 of the federal CPRs, so back over to the workers and working over at the actual new debates and fighting Congress to suggest more for any role neutral government. We got to do co-sponsors and include other problems more than advisable, no willing to bring to the forum. Leadership never compromised, that's why they could only do reconciliation. Shutdown is inevitable, hopefully 9-5 does. Prepared to fight back, use showdown for progressive renegade subsidies, Trump sending authority to the red, not supporting wars, ability to with red, support rise. So no negotiations over reversing provisions, Trump can't support NATO, leverage leverage both parties, Trump wants to shut down. You won't use PC, that's the thing one Trump overstepped into the leader. You have open bill policy priority strategy with a leader without any followers, Trump's limited skills, including bargaining skills, for timing, genocide, position taking, like a general strategy. General strategy. General lack of strategy.
Okay. Are you good?
Mm-hmm.
I had condo and land back without a tax. Are there any other reasons to reject the team?
I don't think so.
Okay. The rates DA. Or first on T subsets. What was the functional we need argument?
There wasn't one. No F. Possibly.
Well, no, I have we meet it adding highlight to 1AC.
That was for we meet our counterintuitive.
I
And
see.
then it's a contextually substantial interpretation of the resolution, which is
Okay.
correct.
Okay, back to the race DA then. You've said that the link cannot be true because the plan reverts to pre-Trump status quo. If people wanted those jobs, they would have already traded off. Why do you think our link is about private sector trade-off or going to the public sector?
Well, you've tagged the card that the plan creates a lucrative outside option for workers. The federal government is
And
not
it also-
lucrative,
it
and it was
also-
lucrative pre-Trump, so the link
Okay,
cannot
so
be true.
why does this answer that federal worker, why does this answer the spillover part though? Like the perception of Trump going back, giving, the public sector unions back, why would that not spur spillover and make other?
So your argument is that the perception of the plan means that private companies will start
Yeah,
bargaining better
exactly.
with their employers, and you think this is in your part where?
Well,
I know you put the word in
said-
other industries really big, but it actually doesn't say it. It says an increase in the outside upstream for workers in other industries, meaning like private sector to private sector spillover, not public sector to private sector spillover, because you don't have a card about the private or about the public sector. So I didn't answer the link because you didn't read
Well, no, it
the
says
gap
that-
about federal workers.
Okay, I see.
Right, you see.
Well, okay. The plan is a return to a pre-Trump status quo, which disproves the link chain. Is this external to the private sector trade-off wrong stuff, or is this like inflation
if
would
it-
have already been high, and
No,
so?
no, if it is the case that like the plan will, like weak jobs or like some amount of wage changes or whatever you're going to re-explain the link as,
Well, so our link
like
is
causes
about,
rates, then
so
like, no.
our link is,
It-
our link is perception based.
Perception of what? You haven't read a card about the plan. You
Well-
need, like, for a link to be perception based, you need to, the question is perception of what? And you have not yet answered that because you have no card about federal workers. Your card is about perception from private to private industry, not public to private industry.
okay.
We've been through this.
Schedule F, 1NC internal link is about VC capital. Why do you think that federal cuts implicate that?
About what?
VC, venture capital. Private funding for private innovators. Why do you think that federal funding cuts matter for that?
No, our argument is about federal funding cuts. It's that
Our
venture capital
argument-
bases
our
all of
argument
their
is that-
investment decisions off of data that they get from the federal government. How do you know what the rates are going to be? How do you know what the unemployment or the inflation
Well,
data is?
I'm talking
All of that
specifically
comes
about
from
the
that.
Schedule F part. Like, we'll debate about like the labor statistics stuff broadly later on. But why
That
do
card
you think
says that
that
it solves
federal
innovation.
funding cut?
That card just says it solves innovation.
Schedule, the Neil evidence?
The who?
The Nihil evidence?
Oh, no.
That's what I'm
Sorry.
asking about.
I understand. I thought you were talking about Peterson.
Why do you think that federal tech talent is key to VC funding?
Well, it solves the impact even if VC goes down, is the argument.
Well, the VC is key to
Well, we're disagreeing with that premise by reading a card
10
from federal
minutes.
workers.
Am I keeping these? Yeah, well, those.
Do you know much about this campus? Where are you all from?
GBS.
Got it, okay.
It's what, yeah.
Got a bunch of Chicago reps here. Anybody going to Green, is Green Hill this
Yeah.
weekend or next weekend?
Next week.
Or, there you go.
Yeah. Literally.
What's the topic? Oh, yeah, the Arctic. It's a pretty solid topic. It's fun. It's
There's
fun.
It's fun, but there's no revenue necessarily.
Yeah, that's a problem. You're right.
But we invested so much money on that.
Yep. Yeah. What do you need this as anymore anyway?
Yeah, just kind of play out.
It's been better than PR. This
But this research was really good.
The Arctic research is pretty cool.
Yeah. IP sucked. I don't think it was fun. There was a lot of reading this. This is good.
Did you not think it was fun because doing the research on it was highly technical and required functionally a law degree? Because I find that stuff to be interesting.
Well, this is kind of, but also like,
And if you don't understand it, then you're fine.
Oh, yeah, the judge limitation would be a problem
That's,
too.
I like the formulas and stuff in this one, real too.
yeah, that's really. Oh yeah, you did just say like the DIB one.
Yeah, I basically suggested we run a small clinic.
We have 727.
Like putting out a bunch of sensors and shit for the Arctic for military purposes, which is already kind of happening, so.
Yeah,
Setco states personalism expertise.
Politics after states.
Got it.
Okay. Good. MSU. Okay. Topical last month, the Congress sets Waterman 1 limits alternative mechanisms, explode the topic into individual district or circuit courts, and random agency affirmatives. They can change tiny modifications with internal processes to the NLRB. You have one district court in Arizona grant the right to strike to fast food workers at a single restaurant. Limits how way expanding the topic. Overstretches research, creating crowd asymmetries that favor the F and push the neg to uneducational extremes. 2. Ground Congress is binary, but individual agencies or courts explode decide links. They could re-clarify the status quo, or individual court rulings that were simply ambiguous, no link politics, because they're obviously not the legislature or the plan is announced in June, and spike links to rates of productivity because they can be tiny changes in the status quo. Ground outweighs because the negative is not able to engage without it. Other words support our definition. Resolve. LSA 5, a legislative instrument used for stating policies used. Resolve. Substantially is immediate. Shepherd 98. Substantial is real present time. The plan is announced in June. That's Goose's 25. Vote neg on T. Delay. It justifies science fiction, destroys timely education. Then spikes ground theory and time sensitive to advantages. Check abuse. The 1AC cross-links was also really wishy-washy about which actor they actually use. So the requires specification. Bill 85. Those for specificity. That means the plan must enumerate its actor as one of the 3 branches Matheson, and 21 divide powers of federal government into 3 divine categories. Normal means is fake. Rich 95 discussion focus on the world. Normal means whatever. The state law. We meet. No shot. The plan's most likely interpretation. This district courts that the Supreme Court upheld. That was cross-links. Executive reversal. That is upheld by court. Still fiat's court action. And that does not even meet our interpretation because we said it must be Congress. They cannot be the executive. Reject plain text in a vacuum. Interpret tags. Cross-links highlighting. 2AC strategy and the plan determine violations and prevents plan vagueness and unpredictable shifts. Their interpretation explodes limits that lets them fiat in anything with resolutional language. It's unfair. They'll re-clarify later, which kills ground and clash. It also mixes burdens and allows them to defend different action for T versus case, forcing impossible 2 hours on T and substance. Vote neg on presumption. We've won the F. As is isn't topical, so you jurisdictionally cannot vote on it. Now they say precision. We solve it. Our evidence cites a judge on the Supreme Court of Iowa and case law. Their evidence is about teachers unions and only about state, not federal law. Insert the re-highlighting. Their second card is also inapplicable. It's about state law. Insert the re-highlighting. Regardless, our impacts outweigh. 1. Voting neg makes our interpretation more predictable. Evolution of community norms shape what is research. Shape what is research. 2. A limited topic is innately more predictable, which guides research. 3. Predictability is subjective, and some loss is inevitable because it's based on background or school and research direction. For example, MSU seems to think that whatever the topic is totally different from the rest of the community, proving that it is not determined by legal precision, but rather the consensus of debaters, which is determined through ballots. 4. Predictability is useless on broad topics because you just predict losing to a new case in every debate. 5. Judge norm solve and make our interpretation de facto more predictable. 6. Predictability is a sliding scale, so they must win a large internal length. They say the court's counterblend. 1. It's good. It encourages research, requires case-specific evidence, and Congress decides as a net benefit. The normal garbage PQD version never works because the PQD does not apply on this topic because labor is obviously not a political question. The alternative is generics or process counterblends, which is obviously much worse. 2. There are other remedies. They can win textual and functional competition or write a better plain text. I think they said that on federalism, so we'll explicitly concede that argument, which means this counterblend does not compete other than the world in which we go for a dissent, which is obviously a great debate to have. 3. It's fair. Court action is generally ad hoc and not textually based, proven by previous affirmatives. 4. Error neg. They have infinite prep to find one Congress key warrant, but at each tiny remedy to the law is a new case neg. 5. They get Trump says no, which is so good. Certainty, delay, etc. Those are overpowered because Trump repeatedly ignored court rulings. 6. Is an independent education net benefit. A core question in labor law is the choice between alternate decision makers analyzing the merits and drawbacks of different branches. Teaches students how to make accurate predictions in public policy and institutional choice. 7. If they win this, it proves theory checks judges adapt because they coach teams who have to be in affirmative. 2. Court dissents are also good. They encourage you to learn about the court. And timely controversy, which is uniquely valuable. No over-limiting. They can read aspects like total bargaining, secondary strikes, whatever Emory's app is. And even this app, as long as they use Congress, which allows us to read links to our dissents, depth over breadth is key to portable skills. Innovation through advantages solve no impact topics like Latin America and healthcare. Proof limits great depth and teach teams to adapt. Teach teams to adapt. Net ground outweighs. They get infinite prep to find creative apps and structural advantages from case selection and speaking last. Functional limits fail. Their interpretation removes them. Politics assumes radical statutory changes, not tweaks. There's no other constraint. They can specify any court, and the bar is low since they get infinite prep to find unique link turns. Good for one cases that cannot be fact-checked will beat generics. Empirics prove. Even if not, they crush research and turn debate into anti-educational extremes. All of the
arguments that they listed are wrong. States is dead because the conservative court has an itchy trigger finger for preemption because they hate labor policy, and the cap K loses to perm. It's too ideological and cannot limit out any affirmatives. And they cannot limit out any affirmatives. And the double bind is factually true, especially on this topic, because no part of capitalism requires labor law to, or no part of capitalism requires labor law to exist. Lastly, reasonability. It's arbitrary. It causes judge intervention and kills fairness. They are not reasonable if they wreck the topic. And the combination of all reasonable cases obviously explodes limits. No crowd out when T-proof substance was impossible. T debates are good. They increase legal education and teach nuance. The alternative is process counterplan or competition debates when we're stuck debating MSU's 7th District Court F and competing interpretations cause the top line agrees with the best practice. K. Concede the perm, reject the argument not the team. Condo was good, we get what we did. 1 blocks you, F change the 2C, which covers multiple options. They encourage sandbagging, which undermines clash and turns Q to neck flex. The neck is always reactionary to F choice and infinite private. Test the intrinsicness of unpredictable advantages. Add-ons and deficits. 3 logic, find the best policy option, disproving advocacies. Does not prove the plan is good. 4 misdisclosing and then redisclosing it 10 minutes later is a voting issue. Also, new plans are a voting issue for removing pre-round prep, skew, and research are inevitable. Thumb by dissets and procedurals, disproves ad hoc condo. It makes F choice too powerful, incentivizes process and plan claimant, costs the research and balance. States. Perm argument not the team. Politics concede plans in June, which proves that their model debate is unworkable. Case. Maritime war outweighs speed, sea-based escalation is instantaneous, nuclear mines and sea-launched missiles blur traditional fire rates, countries favor tactical nuclear use with no warning, ocean fog ignites flashpoints before any check that's caution, no link is classic MSU cowardice, Homer Dixon says ceding to Trump's authority empowers authoritarianism domestically and abroad, weakens democratic provision of public goods and sees the global balance of power to authoritarians. I'm going to read this slowly for you because they just lost the debate when they basically dropped this impact term. Quote, second Trump administration is much more likely to empower authoritarianism domestically and abroad, weaken multilateral institutions that provide global public goods. Populist authoritarian contagion could legitimize populist authoritarian movements elsewhere. American shift toward authoritarianism would validate the politics of existing and aspiring authoritarian leaders. The U.S. has been a crucial example of how democracy, peace, and prosperity have powerfully reinforced each other. No other country is positioned to pick up the mantle. The loss of the American example will further cede ideological space to authoritarian ideologies. The one you see Hansen evidence also says that it's an inflection point for the global transition between autocracy and democracy. Their only other answer to this is that the plan de-escalates hotspots. That is absolutely not true. Our evidence says there are structural factors among democracy that is verified by empirical statistical studies like property values as well as hawkish foreign policy that drive escalation, which means that no world in which the plan exists can resolve those maritime disputes because they are driven by structural factors of governance. The plan directly upholds. Now, Homer Dixon is wrong. Assurances are intact. And Trump's officials prior to his foreign engagement official statements reveals allies are calm and collected. No Trump foreign policy disasters. Cronin 24 dismissed scares about anonymous South loyalists. Debate analyze Star Wars until Ukraine. Trump was effective focus on peace on China and Iran. Season pros are adults with mission of isolation. Trump engaged in the medias and diplomacy with allies in Europe and Asia, close relations with Japan. Abraham Accord with Camel withdrawal from Iran and INF were pragmatic. Trump was opposed to NATO flank are more important, but countries into NATO interests with alliance on Ukraine if Putin refused. Trump could no source the ceasefire. The Hyman's evidence is wrong. Trump is isolationist and errs towards de-escalation. There's no scenario for war in the 2AC at all in empirical studies. Verify restraint. That's Rajagopal on no first strike impact. This is not an add-on to the app because it proves that he will not first strike regardless of whether or not he has advisor, or he will not fire these advisors. Kurt's 24 sole authorities ordering to attack or POTUS without consultation. There is no bond in our codes of POTUS will confer the sack that senior officers of the National Security Council to ensure authorities probably access Trump's senior leaders who resigned dissent to be honest saving guys use nukes illegal secure councils because of attack POTUS attempted Armageddon with sufficient robust and petty clearances, reliability assurance and training, well educated and highly capable. Advantage 1 or the other advantage. The impact about Ukraine is wrong. There's no will or capacity for nuclear escalation. Shinkman 20 feet likelihood of Russia using nukes astronomical, shocking, seriously considered Putin will leaders believe he might, but he's not. Suicidal with reference to nuclear war, attacking nuclear weapons, etc. Which leader feels desperate for leverage? Russia's influence are dwindling in Russia. War is not popular. Reports emerge about lack of confidence. Surface leaders in nukes would achieve James doctrine calls for warheads to attack Russians with all regretted. Doctrine of retaliation. You've lost the operational advantage. Argue Putin not devastating effect on Russia. If it were to launch nuclear weapons, our 1C evidence says there are structural constraints like MAD that prevent escalation. The SWAGES evidence and middle powers wrong. Middle power scenario is totally contrived. Great powers ignore them. They have no fiscal or military leverage and are bogged down by corruption or nuked by terrorists. That's fattened. And worse, there's no reason why the U.S. would treat an attack on Romania as a prelude to nuclear escalation that would stay conventional. Ukraine proves that. Now, all of their evidence is bad. The Kimmich evidence says that the root cause to foreign policy is Trump's transactional style. They cannot solve that. Insert 3 highlighting. There are also psychological incentives that block escalation. Inserted. There's so many all causes: borders, nationalism, and social media, which are all systemic factors in Trump's personality that the plan cannot solve, as well as the Ukraine loss. And the Samson evidence is similarly bad. It says there's tons of all causes like U.S. isolationism, Russian and Chinese revisionism in Israel, which all make escalation inevitable, so the case cannot solve any of that.
Good.
Yeah.
Let's start on T. Though require specification, must numerate a actor. You're wanted in the plain text, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, cool. is fake. Why is this relevant?
And strike that. I didn't really.
Okay, cool. Not bad. Let's talk about playing in a vacuum. Your interpretation was tags, cross-secting, highlighting. Presumably those three refer to the 1AC and then 2AC strategy. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So if like the 2AC says on the politics DA, no link where the chords, the plan is in June, we can do
Okay,
yeah,
your
that's
second
possible.
standard was that the F will clarify later, which Rex being negative. Your interpretation was 2AC strategy. Like, why is this better?
Well, also so if tags and cross-sects and highlighting of the 1AC all characterize the plan as being court action, then we would probably factor that into our strategy.
Okay, let's talk about democracy for a moment. The 1NC card that you read, presumably as what you think is the link,
Yeah.
says, quote, it says, democracy provides for free and fair elections and protects property rights. Democracy go hand in hand with maritime conflicts because the largest fishing fleets of the world come from democratic states. What part of the plan changes fishing fleet size?
Well, so your 1AC evidence lines that you have highlighted especially say that the plan is the, make or break for a global transition towards authoritarianism.
And what card have you read that transition means people stop investing in fish fleets?
Well, so we've read evidence that says democracies are much more likely to have maritime conflicts in the first place.
But
The
these
plan prevents
democracies,
a global transition,
Okay.
towards democracy and away from authoritarianism, which
But
causes
this card,
peace.
okay, also, let's talk about, uniqueness for a moment. This card is about fishing fleets of the status quo. Obviously, people have fishing fleets. Why haven't we seen more?
Well, so massive democratization leads to escalation in flashpoints, or 1C causal evidence
what do
indicates
you-
that there are hotspots that are likely to escalate
Including?
among.
I didn't catch any of the 2NC.
Yeah, SCS, well, I mean, the 2AC dropped the impact, so I
Not
shouldn't
true.
have to list a bunch of countries. The SCS, ECS, Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific could all be places where conflict arises that have nuclear powers have interest in.
And which
escalated.
card do you think says SCS, ECS, or describes a scenario for conflict?
Well, this really equally applies to the 1AC. Our causal evidence gestures at the possibility of nuclear use.
It
More
says,
broadly, in
throughout
maritime
much of the 20th century, a presumption that warfare at sea could involve the employment of nuclear weapons underpinned force design. And you've highlighted warfare at sea involved nukes. Are you serious? Where it says that is the reason that we made our fleets this way, but not that war is possible or likely in any way.
No.
The cards about the Cold War, it says nuke mines and death
Yeah,
charges
the link
are in
cards-
first part during the Cold War.
Yeah, it says wars at sea could escalate with nuclear weapons. We've read a link card that says democracy
No, it says
causes
during the
war
Cold
at
War
sea.
we thought they would. Obviously they didn't.
Yeah, it then cites recent trends in military modernization and concludes that war is likely,
Sorry,
especially likely now given those trends.
Sentence rates.
Summer, can you fill out my log?
Let me know when everyone gets it.
Did you say the order?
Yeah, just rates. I think.
Just for you.
Yeah.
Yes, just for you.
MSU and GL good.
Innovation outweighs fast like uncertainty, fuel safety, spending, cushioning all risk, otherwise pandemics, warming, and terror actions. Asher Brennan that solves the case. Innovation enables rapid solution to apply crisis risk and mitigates the impact of nuclear war. So spending is diverted to bunkers and resilience, enabling any intervening actors to solve the entirety of the case. Drop the impact, no new impact defense in the 1 yard. Trump will not kill innovation. When it's a counterplan to roll back cuts and restore R&D, unleashing innovation. Drop down rate cuts are impending and solve innovation. Should try or dynamic. Federal science funding and expertise have no benefit, and the private sector will pick up the slack. So rate cuts are so key. Keely and pretty much on the science are just by government funding. Jerry goes on research. Lossy for the UK, presidential revolution in the US, legislation, and phrase, and Germany, yeah, building everything you on, you get GDP, all that knowledge, schools are rolling to end, considering so many research, see to have the copy and cannot, unless you're researching every also, research, and no one of the bank also, World War I, the hash, running to people, so World War II, what is the essential family, saw AFL, government funding, crowds out, empirically, a fallen property of 0.15% goes to the present industry, R&D of 0.48. VC is necessary for startups, which is the key internal link embargo during the beginning of for tech startups at VC instrumental and financial items with the potential for disruption influx of capital, provide necessary resources goes beyond financial support and vital guidance, connection is a symbiotic relationship between foster innovation, validation of a business model attracts individual investors, further fueling cuts. Congress controls spending and they won't cut funding. Chris 25 Congress which controls spending on the might ignore government Chinese pleading to protect money for research and achieve the companies the campaign seems to be working on the budget, which dropped by 0.6% rather than 50%. He says funding restrictions will eventually get rolled back, including staffing things with solved the case Gillen and 25 what are the prospects of the camp. Thus taking not good course have already paused the limitation. Congress want the other way, placing restriction on AHs the ability to cap rates they may kill this effort. Now, the plan spills over. Siloed unionization is a myth. Wage increases are perceived naturally. Industry unions observe outside union power, showing an outside option, creating a vicious feedback loop between options that's creating more warrants. One, mirroring corporations and employees intently follow the Fed's approach to unions. The plan's precedent emboldened private sector unionization. So within 25 treatment of federal workers in Delaware, the labor corporation look to Fed and see what it is doing. When Biden works to figure that is a single admin is going to take a different approach and they open CC corporation. Their key from beginning corporation will feel emboldened the mission for us to lower organization across the board. As the treatment of federal workers goes, so goes the rest of the workforce in the board. For workers, when they see others on strike. 2, bargaining any increase in the value of outside options enables all workers to bargain. According to 22, unions affect non-union wages, they're related union wages to unionization and third bargaining unionization had a substantial point provide evidence from silver effects to threat and bargaining any policy that raises worker outside option values will raise wages for a wide set of workers. That outside option for forces first in seemingly disparate context to hike their wages, creating a profit trade-off. As here 22, see first the increased wages. This generates lower wages. The response to the wage of the outside option rise and first the increased wage and workers works. The government leaders switch across industrial and geographic boundaries. Creating dependency between workers and the seemingly agent for also by saying so. This reveals the slower effects of profit margin decrease that indicates the wage trade off. These are covered firms. 3, threat-affecting employees in other industries will deserve the blame and attempt to replicate union successes cause emulation and union wage practices show to ignore their externalities of unionization that affect non-union firms and their aligning thereafter or interaction employees about potential unionization is the entry knowledge of how to organize and non-union employees are more likely to organize union after serving union in the area of one. The firm has a unit non-union firms that face the unionization. The following shot other unions and non-union firms are more worried about workers being unionized and higher wage increase because it was lower. Affects the high and private shot union increase of likelihood of substantial union victories. The works the production of wage unions of non-union firms central to push on 20 unions the less than the fame through influence on non-union firms and non-union firms so they have to prevent their own unionization. 30% this doesn't pay higher their the products that go down using data from the US of unionization so the more than the fact that firms are actually unionized might be a key channel through which a union affect output. Okay, now note the numbers returning to pre-Trump does not dump the mere existence of CBR for federal workers post in the past obviously is not understood the same as the private sector actively by the private sector as the plan's active bolstering of worker power. The plan is a bullet from the blue. Remember the link is about the Fed's anticipation of future wage raises. Wage raises they were priced into the Fed calculations before and in the status quo. But the plan is a total 180 from structural deregulation happening now, which makes them believe that more inflation is to come, which causes a rate hike. Drop, they don't get new rate hikes defense. Now federal economics data is still reliable. The system is automated and tamper-proof. Councilman 95 the numbers featured yes, the BLS is being run by Wade Trusky and BLS I frankly until the stats free of influence commission whether they know would not be able to meddle the produce on a time schedule. Use automated process most reportedly terribly by companies that she guys the commissioner does not have access to data numbers until final there's not one person who can elevate things for stiff parts. Now long-term drivers fail which also answers the Schedule F. Solvency is preceded by immediate hikes. The next meeting is September 16th, so time frame is auto-neg, brain drain, and the Trump meeting is reversed by solvency research funding. By the solving research funding, the 1AC CIP evidence says that reversing funding was the biggest implication. VC has external that's above rate cuts off. Shannon 23 tech innovation, rely on R&D innovation, scaling low cost fuel innovation, and that's raising climate cost increase, leading to tending funds at higher rates, so cash flow flows and limited ability to reinvest in startups, so rely on reinvestment through development breakthrough. Tech companies will have a high PE of 2E ratios and are low dividend when retail increase value decrease leading to valuation of stocks and retail, and by the ability to raise capital and innovation. The Trump is extremely pro tech innovation. Now between 95 the Trump hosted tech leaders they held to pro innovation and the investment and the investment and the ability to power of the industry back in the US appraisal, presenting the total price to Trump at first and the support AI supporting our companies out instead of finding this ship as it usually important for tech. Okay, now this spillover does not depend on federal workers raising wages. All evidence above is largely about the perception of unionization or lack thereof. Powerful federal unions will lobby Congress for pay increases. Virtually one ML lobbies higher the unions of other advocating for Congress about government works, including pay increases. Otherwise, the act fails. Lack of wage pressures waters down union players. Now, the link does not require private sector trade-off. It's about spilling over to broad innovation or unionization. Regardless, federal workforce small does not answer that others will perceive the plan's boon to unions as an economy-wide green light. Now, the economics of war is tariffs and broadcast undermining data uncertainty, which is all answered above. Boosting unemployment is good, which is the only impact of their card. The 1C evidence says that cuts are coming now because labor is weak. That is dropped lower, because it is perceived as lowering broad costs. I'm going to read more link cards unless there's something you want me to say in 20 seconds. Firms will fear a trend, implement wage compression to stop it. 421, union power influence wage and non-union sector Of course, and emulate the union wage structure to discourage workers from supporting unionization to affect increase every cell effects of unionization by making union wages similar to the union sector related to incorporate third effects of bias down, and the estimates of the effect of the ice spillover doubles the contribution of unionization. Adding spillover doubles the contribution of deunionization. That is the 1421 evidence.
Wait, yep.
Last card in the
Deunionization. Yep, we have 945.
Just the first.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Got it.
That's who we want. Yeah.
Is the like season opener happening now at the UK tournament? Do you all have
Right now.
representatives there?
No, we don't have any.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, those people is either Niles or Christian this year.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Niles is just one of the teams. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Green Home basically. First half he did.
So a tournament like this is happening, it seems like the judging pool gets whittled down pretty significantly, I assume. You know?
Yeah, they're not.
Niles was supposed to be this weekend and then they pushed it up.
I think it's
Because of this.
Yeah. I think UK's gonna be like CT. And people, it's their last season.
And this.
Is Greenstone still GB? Yeah. He and I debated at the same time.
You and nitrogen. You and nitrogen.
Greenstone.
Yeah. CK.
Was it good? Yeah, it was great. Luckily his partner dropped. Didn't extend their team term when there's no way to bet ours, and so we took him out. I think he's doubles at the UT tournament, but we kinda lucked out. It wasn't on him, it was definitely the winning arc. I think at that same tournament, he beat the living crap out of us when he was there.
You go for Heidegger. You told me he was going.
Well, he's lying to you, I think.
He said it. Heidegger. I thought he was joking too. He said it's the one thing.
I don't think I've ever absurded him over a kid, but I mean, I made it happen.
No, you probably. You might have been.
You can pay.
No, I would say.
It wouldn't surprise me. I think at that time, there were a few digital cameras, but some people still had the kind of tapes, and it wouldn't surprise me if Wake has
Oh, yeah,
a video
yeah,
stored
they're
somewhere.
Yeah.
They haven't done a great job of kind of transferring it over.
Yeah. I feel like there's probably something like that.
I think he's too old, or too young. He came after Greenstone.
Yeah, I think his earliest was in 2000.
like quarters in some ways, so, I mean, not the best team in Italy, so,
No, he said he was never the top team for that.
well, but, I mean, they're still pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at the analysis game.
This is actually the oldest one. And not pretty good. Oh, yeah, it was last.
What do you think, Joe?
Oh, there's some 2004.
Yeah.
That would be it.
Oh, 320.
Yeah.
I think that looked at his senior year. Oh, those videos?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Okay. The order will be, the case, expertise, or personalism, then expertise. T courts, or no, okay, sorry. Order instead will be personalism, expertise, the set called K, T courts, the rates meter. And there is a doc, I'm gonna send it right now. Okay, so. Michigan's good? Wait.
Give us.
Okay.
I'm just organizing.
Mhm. We're good?
Yeah.
You look? Yep. Alright. Almost said it's at 3:21.
Polycrisis has dropped out of three speeches, and polycrisis guarantees extinction, overlapping structural issues, economics, political polarization, environmental crisis, and disease, overwhelming response capacity, which guarantees systemic collapse is uniquely exacerbated by Trump, which is Homer Dixon. There's no way innovation can solve it, because it's about containing Trump's escalatory capacity, and there's no reason why that would be able to solve independently, encourages nuclear populism, which destroys incredible homeland deterrence and causes conflict, which is Hyman's evidence. Now, the democracy bad stuff is completely irrelevant. One, the app solves it. Experts would solve crisis escalation or fog of war, even if they win the maritime escalation is more likely. Two, what are they talking about? There's no actors in the car, there's no scenario for escalation. Their evidence is about fishing, right? This is about fishing capacity and proves that there's no real scenario or reason for escalation or why democracy is key. Maybe they're right that the plan maybe slightly linearly increases the amount of democracy there is, but it does not necessarily result in those things. But it also does not result in that. Three, it's not an external impact. Since maritime is just one way Trump could escalate the polycrisis, which is above. There's no link. Their evidence is ridiculous. There's no reason why the plan increases war or tensions, or why democratic states necessarily resolve that. Now, I'm not going for the other impacts, so it's irrelevant. The assurances does not answer our advantage because it's about Trump impact. And the last couple arguments that does not assume that when he sees Trump's unchecked second term and advisors are key. Yes, firing. When he sees uniqueness, evidence says he's doing it now. Now, the expertise advantage. Saying expertise solves central regional conflict. Expertism is key to manage regional and policy conflicts that Trump's reactionary foreign policy would otherwise escalate. Multiple hotspots right for nuclear escalation. Taiwan, Ukraine, the Middle East with erratic leaders, which is Kim mentioned, proves that it solves both the impact to innovation and democracy. But the structural constraints is irrelevant. Man was a cardless assertion, and it doesn't matter. The next three arguments, experts containing the impact of Trump's transactionalism, which is our argument for why it would solve. Now, the set call K, we did not misdisclose. The 1AC was the same. We added 3 new cards and a new plan, which is good. It's key to critical thinking and app innovation. Any new 2 extrapolation just by new to our interest. Now, the courts counter plan, extend the court T courts, extend the counter CBO strength, a scale-based measure of legal discretion that courts can interpret. That's job
not insane. It's the most precise interpretation. They're both using Freeman scale, which is the most cited in general practice. Their cards are not. LSA is a glossary that isn't contextual, and Waterman is only about that singular court case and not about models that conceded that contextual precision is best. From T subsets, it's the only way to check debaters putting rights in Congress into Google and cutting the first thing they see is key to predictability and turns all their offense. A limited topic is useless if nobody knows what the limit is. Norms and wins don't shape it because nobody pays attention, especially the season opener where a prep happened before all that. Limits don't solve it. Or vote on counter interpret only our app and not useless. You won't just predict losses, you'll predict what ground you get and F ground the app is defenses against aging counterplays and court disads and can't solve because putting in the plan means Trump and court says no is an auto loss. Defense, grow up. One strategy versus court solved. Go for court links to politics. Or Congress and reverse politics, or a court dissent like legitimacy, or stare decisis, or state courts counterplan. Plus, there are limited advocates for court actions for the late ensures a cap on CDRs and drop the links for perception based anyway, so actors are relevant. They can't solve their offense because people will just read their app with any agent. June is not a voter. One, the plan is done now but announced later. There's a difference because the plan's implementation is immediate, which meets and shields ground. That's how courts work, so it should be F ground. If we have a card 2, 0 impact or standards, just say delays a voter. If anything makes do the plan now competitive. 3, should refers to the future ground, and 8, the word should in phrase may determine phrases considering possible future events. Now, plan text in a vacuum, extend it. It's the only objective way to decide atomicality debate. Anything else, just a goalpost, which makes it impossible to be apt and mixes burdens because you'll look at advantages to C, which we meet, which Dex fairness and the purpose of T, which we meet. Vagueness is wrong. It's a scroll. Plans have never been worse. 2, our model solves. Both teams define plan words. 3, theirs is worse, makes a plan meaningless. 4, worst case judges will vote on theory. 1, ACCX is a terrible answer. Means the neck doesn't find out what the app does until too late. Tags is unworkable. They're for argument making, not defining the plan. And now is key should not make the delay counterplay competitive. Solvency evidence has no right line, which just goalposts and can't handle the app. 2, solvency advocates. Now, the rates, DA, case solves, the dissent, and our impacts are worse. Now, there's no reason why innovation would necessarily resolve the excesses of Trump and proves that they can't solve. Maybe if they solve some forms of war, they would not solve structural constraints. They cannot solve cases or internal links about structural checks on Trump, which was above. Now, reliable statistics underpin economic policy and certainty. Trillions depend on trust. In nonpartisan experts, the effects are catastrophic, which is the Kruger evidence. It's not just the BLS commissioner. Trump's new schedules are what model the math. Take in 25 not only how to calculate unemployment and labor market requiring a whole new country of people. Trump's warned of a paper that flagged up changes in civil service employment classification to disaster system provoke a more dangerous thing Trump has done. We need to like-minded people career civil service no doubt will resist. They persist would have resignation whistleblowing. See disruptions BLS doesn't normally have without transparency required to have persuade the system. Best case admin step for the bring and maintain current and partial lines will make more mistakes at policy business level. Civil service protections protects the integrity of the Fed that relies on to set rates. Husu and 25 Trump's politicizing the civil service Fed used data raise or lower rates underlying a shared trust is that free from political and favoritism perception data can be manipulated to change that trustworthiness lost huge implications for an economy expertise that we need not loyalty. It's comparatively larger. Their scenario is one-shot decisions. Ours is the foundation of decision-making. Castleman and 25 reliable. Independent statistics are critical to public and private sector. Federal line government data on inflation and employment decide how to set interest rates helps not just the Fed, helps government, also private sector leader for 100 years. Really need to continue that. The block read one card about federal workers and it proves that it's empirically denied. Their F says Biden was on a picket line. But there was no wage hikes, there's no modeling because collective bargaining rights over the federal government have never had anything to do with wages, which proves that they could never negotiate it and it's empirically denied. JD Vance was also on a picket line, which proves that even if there is a reaction, it's tiny and insufficient to trigger the rate cuts DA. The link is small in pricing, cost, about 25 best guesses. Total federal employees decline by 25,000 and 50,000 over the next few months. Impact will be modest. Estimates carry significant uncertainty, signing potential reversals on net, exerting only modest effects on payroll, consistent with the expectation for job markets to occur. Now, the wage increase. Trump.
Sir, could you say their card to answer stats?
The card to answer stats is app. It says economics across the political spectrum have criticized Trump's decision to fire the head. President Trump, E.J. Antoni, a conservative economist with a history of distorting statistics to support his political arguments. Mr. Antoni is not yet to be confirmed by the Senate. Trump is not axing jobs, just shuffling who fills them. The net size of the labor market doesn't change, so it cannot affect wages. And they don't have a good spillover called card. One, Wall Street expects the courts will strike down Trump's action. He knows they're illegal, which solves their flip-flop argument. Overturning Chevron created regulatory chaos, so it's slumped.
These reviews.
Was there a card for the thing that
Yep,
you
just sent it.
Okay, I need, okay, sure, thank you. Yeah. Then the last thing that was rates, that was analytic, that was.
Correct.
Okay.
Was it a reading? Oh, no, the last thing I said wasn't analytic.
From Joanna's thing, that was, you gave him analytics, not a card rate, for rates.
It was a rehighlight.
It was a rehighlighting which I just sent into the email.
Okay, oh, I got it now, thank you. What was the JD Vance example on the link defense, like under no
He was
modeling?
also
He was on a
running
picket line for the Teamsters, but should thump.
The Smith card is about buying and being on picket line.
Okay.
Should thump or reaction is tiny, if there is one.
Okay. And sorry, just one last thing. For innovation doesn't solve the case. It was just like constraints on Trump are key. That was the one thing.
Say it again?
For innovation does not solve the case. The one thing was that constraints are key, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was my last thing.
MSU. Game over! One of your jobs resolved means legislative vote neg on jurisdiction. You literally cannot vote F because they have not met a stock issue or LSE evidence is clear resolved denotes a legislative instrument for stating policies which must be Congress. Treat this as equivalent to if the 2AC drop topicality. Their only outs are 1, predictability. They gestured at the card being bad, but they have no counter interpretation and no alternative to what resolved means. 2, plain text in a vacuum. The plain text does not say the word resolved, and the logical interpretation of plain in a vacuum is that if the plain says it, interpret the plain to be that thing, but the plain does not say resolved. The one here also did not make either of these cross applications, so the 2 here will sound great, but it will be all new and strike it off in your flow. Now, T proper, vote neg for limits. MSU's interp is a topic killer. They open the floodgates to tiny and niche cases from district courts in Arizona or shoring up tiny gaps in LRRB enforcement. Drop the terminal impact only about the topic preserves debates educational value, where we go in-depth and research proposals that it's only possible if the sides are balanced and must outweigh predictability and half-ground. Defense is wrong. Courts politics does not apply to district or appellate courts or individual agencies. Stare decisis is stumped to kingdom come because the current court is going rogue, and they also drop meta-level frames for functional limits. New affirmatives cannot be fact-checked and will empirically beat court disadvantages, as well as the Congress counterline that does not even compete because they said they can be the courts or Congress, and they are all concessionary ground and lead to stale debates. Links being perceptually based is wrong. Court staffs drastically lower the scope of asks because they can apply in one district court jurisdiction and fly under the radar. They can also be announced after disadds link lose uniqueness and concede politics is a key functional limit, which they obviously destroy. Framing issue before I answer any of their offense is the one error tried to go for way too much and drop defense to both predictability and half-ground. In order to evaluate anything the 2AR says, you must literally draw a line on your flow from the 1AR to the 2AR, otherwise strike these arguments off your flow because I could not anticipate them. First, predictability, dead wrong. 1, norm-solved debaters are undergraduate students who show up to tournaments to win debates. We are not pedantic lawyers trying to nitpick tiny legal differences. The only answer is no one pays attention, but that is ridiculous. It is equally likely people don't pay attention to tiny legal differences given that both of our cards cite state law, but this is the top bracket at the season opener and both of us broke at the NET. Voting neg makes our interpretation more predictable by signaling that it is strategic. Empirics prove arguments like Spark or the Fiat K are never things you would even know about except for the fact that they won debates that obviously people drove people to research them. 2, it's intractable. They dropped, it is impossible to reach consensus on what constitutes a good definition because everyone researches differently. MSU, Michigan, Emory, Kansas, Wake Forest will have drastically varying interpretations of what the topic means. Think about how last year MSU for some reason thought MBI meant liability. Michigan experimented with LCFSs and subsidies. Some K teams read apps that failed the control F test for climate change, and other apps read carb attacks all year. No matter how authoritative the Moselle card was last year, people ran with what worked. That proves that universalizing their interpretation is impossible as a basis to guide research. 3, drop predictability is a sliding scale. Our interpretation is good enough because it cites case law. 4, our impact turns it because it's impossible to research. And an unbounded topic, half-ground, no shot. I will be so mad if you vote on this because they dropped all 8 things I said. 1, the court's counterline is good and encourages research, requires case-specific evidence. Then Congress decides the alternative is process counterlines. They've dropped that textual and functional competition checks back because they don't compete off of that. They've dropped that. They have infinite prep to find one Congress keyword. They can say Trump says no because he's ignoring the courts. And they've also conceded that theory checks, which means their only way out is plain text in a vacuum. Rejected. We agree topicality is about the plan, but its likely interpretation is clarified by tags, cross-text, highlighting, and 2EC strategy. This is predictable and fair because these are all things they choose to defend and call their strategy around it. Prefer it. 1, shiftiness, as more unpredictability. And the 2EC to spike out of disads and counterline competition arguments. That kills pre-run strategy, which hurts clash and kills fairness. That also proves our limits and ground impacts up top link because they will re-clarify later to get out of them. The implication is that you cannot separate the plain text in a vacuum debate from the rest of the T debate. 2, content depth. Their model creates early game ambiguity about what exactly the land mandates. That necessitates positional holdups, otherwise 2A sandbag clarifications, which makes debates late breaking that not only hurts clash, but forces judge intervention due to lack of speech times. 3, skew and substance crowd out. They force the 2AR to extend both topicality and substance. That kills fairness because the 2AR can win on either thing, but we're forced to win both. This is compounded by existing structural advantages like infinite prep and the choice of case selection that hose the 2AR's ability to adequately anticipate 2EC and 1AR pivots and broadly imply that you should overcorrect for negative ground. Substance counter also outweighs this, keep the debate's educational value and generate portable skills. Now, their defense sucks. Vagueness is the quo. It's ridiculous. It's only prevalent because of planicality and underhanded 2EC tactics, allowing us to pin them to specific positions themselves. Reading definitions fails. 1, it forces the fight over what should be a given. They make ground conditional and create argumentative variance, which destroys strategy. 2, this is the whole point of our skew standard. They force us to win a T debate prior in addition to winning substance, which kills fairness by heightening our burden and clearly causes substance crowd out. Our model does not make the plan meaningless. It gives it context through the position they take in cross-text and tags. It's an interpretation for how both sides garner offense, whereas it's only a role for the F. They make the plan meaningless until after the 2AC, where they pick and choose their mandate to beat the 1C strategies. Theory checks equally cut to both ways. Judges can omit ridiculous counterplans or T violations on theory, but there is no elegant
elegant way to theoretically exclude 2EC antics. The only way is positional competition. This is a theory debated in our way of checking 2EC shiftiness. Now, they say that it's arbitrary and not objective. One, they choose the words they say, anything else moots cross-text and is tantamount to lying. Second is the reason to vote F is advantages in solvency, not just the plan in a vacuum, so it is reciprocal to compete off of those statements. Three is it's most reciprocal. They should not get positional advantages if we cannot test its logical opportunity cost, i.e. if you read a Court's advantage or just say that the F is Court's and cross-text, you should in fact have to answer the Congress counterplan. Four, all our defense on predictability above applies. Our term is predictable enough and you should not sacrifice engagement for a marginally more predictable model, especially given positionality as a well-accepted norm. They say tags are for both argument making and defining the plan. There's no other alternative that doesn't give way to vagueness and late-breaking debates. The now key example sucks. They only said that immediate action is key for the plan, not that they defend immediate fiat. They should just be careful in their tags. Obviously, if the 1EC says the plan is fiat immediately, they should lose. Remember, when we can only take positions on things they defend, so they control what ground, we get to utilize solvency evidence or cards that describe the plan's mechanism in detail. Gut check, you know it when you see it. Obviously, impact or advantage cards don't count and are not a basis for competition. If we started taking ridiculous violations, judges would smite us in the RFD.
3, 2, 1. worst definitions, making debate impossible because we have no idea what we're debating about before tournaments, which is functionally the same as an unlimited topic. Well, now, the 2NR did not answer any of the reasons that precision turns and outweighs their offense. It is the only way to determine what the truth is, and the only way to build a predictable topic. Limits are only valuable insofar as we know what those limits are. Otherwise, you would vote on counter term only or app because it is clearly the most limited. But that is not the point of debate. They also have conceded that we have cards at contextual precision. It's the best way to determine debates. The evidence says that the Freeman argument, the Freeman's taxonomy in that card is the most widely cited and is the way that the literature understands CDRs. We also read a card for contextual precision first on T substantially, and they've never answered it. It is from a court ruling that says that is the only way that we could possibly know what words mean, because just defining things abstractly does not demonstrate anything. All of these indices were not answered. They also did not answer that precision turns their offense because it means that limits are completely useless even if you have ground. You do not know what that ground is or when you can read it or which apps you need to prepare for, which means their offense is useless. It means that limits can never outweigh because limits alone in a vacuum are entirely useless. Now, the top of the 2NR was simply not, was a shot in the dark, but simply not enough. Resolve does not need an answer because it isn't in the resolution. It's before it because it's before the colon. Yes, this is new, but it is an explanation of why the 1AR did not need to read a card, not simply a brand new argument off the flow. Obviously, they could have predicted this argument because that's always been the answer to defining resolve. You cannot win a T debate by defining the word significantly because it doesn't appear in the resolution, just as you cannot win a debate defining the word resolve because it is not in the resolution. It is before it. Now, Cyrus might be bad at a decision, but you were an adult with a mortgage, and you know that this argument is simply not a reason to vote negative. It has never been sufficient, even though they ever defined the word. The card also, we've indicted that card, which demonstrates that we clearly did have an answer to this. That extrapolation about why that card is not precise should be sufficient because it is not a matter of jurisdictionally voting on topicality. We have to find other words in the resolution to mean that the app can be Congress, and we have to find words in the actual resolution to mean that the app can be things that aren't Congress, which means even if resolved implies that it is not part of the resolution. In other words, in the resolution that are far more predictable ways, even then, predictability outweighs even about their argument about jurisdiction or the plain text because this the 2NR said even if this app is bad, they don't have a counterinterp. Again, we did not need one because it is not a word in the resolution, and there's a reason that people don't go for resolve. Now, the 2NR proper, the topic of argument was answering functional limits, but they conceded a slew of ones from the 1AR. Court politics certainly applies to district courts because it will spill up, and the Supreme Court denying cert, for example, is an argument. Things like stare decisis are not thumped because the Supreme Court obviously still cares about precedent. In a lot of instances, you could read a uniqueness counterplan, and you can read it with the state court's counterplan, which solves all of the apps, and they have not put ink on in the 2NR. Also, arguments clearly are solved by perception dissents, which demonstrates because of the 1NR, it proves you can win spillover because people perceive the app, especially because when a district court or the Supreme Court gives a giant middle finger to Trump that clearly gets perceived and spills over. They also made a generic argument about new apps being you can't fact check arguments. That is wrong because you always get generics. Good job that you get Congress and the reverse politics dissent, which applies to any app regardless of the fact checking. Fact checking also is not a reason for negative ground, which demonstrates they just need one single strategy against any court affirmative for their offense to be zero. Their limits argument only matters insofar as limits are hard to debate, which is just an internal link to ground, and we have given them examples of ground that they can always read. They only need one single strategy for every single court test, which means the limits explosion is not a slew of affirmatives, it is one single one, which is solved by numerous strategies that we listed off, and they did not answer all of them, just about half of them. The framers argument or the argument about the 1AR dropping defense to predictability was not true. All of it was answered, it just was not numbered like you did it. Norms is completely wrong. It does not solve predictability. Different debates for win and loss are on different reasons, which means no single one norm could be built in any debate. For years, people have been losing on A-spec and T-no courts, and that hasn't changed it because nobody's plain text is ever going to say Congress, because then they lose to Trump and the court say no, which was conceded from the 1AR, which means norms could never cause their interpretation because it's simply not strategic enough. Now, the argument that people do pay attention to this debate is ludicrous. People just see a win or loss on tab room. They might know you went for courts, but they don't know what on earth caused it or why your definition wasn't predictable. Now, their argument that wins cause more predictability is wrong because the only reason that those wins happen in the first place is because of predictability. Given we have internally through their offense, their argument about if it's impossible to get consensus is wrong. They drop every indictment of their resolution or of their definition and every product of ours. So clearly, we just debate that thing out. It's impossible to get to a consensus on anything, whether or not there's a link, whether or not hedge is good or bad. But we debate it, which is how we figure those things out. The argument that predictability is a sliding scale is a non-starter because the 2NR did not prodict ours or indict theirs, which means that it cannot be a sliding scale clearly we are ahead, even if it is not even a close on the scale, because our argument is clearly more strategic. They're also, even if the Chouinard is right about their offense in the abstract, they are wrong about how it plays out. There have been topics where they have had to be the courts, and that was completely fine because the negative just has generics against it. The legitimacy, core politics, reverse politics, and Congress, there are numerous answers, which means that their offense is one single affirmative, whereas ours is a model for how you interpret debates, and then how you want to learn about the resolution